So Marx and Marx's critique. I wanted to say, I did a little homework myself this morning, and I prepared a slideshow for you of photographs and etchings of 19th century factories, because I think they kind of both illustrate and give some concreteness to the words that Marx writes in his critique of alienation, his critique of capitalist society. And I thought I'd pick out just one of them to talk about just a little bit, but actually I want you to talk about it. So I want you to look at this photograph and then see what you see in it and see if we can, I don't mean to spend more than 5 or 6 minutes on this exercise, but what do you see? I think I've made it as big as I can. Things you can see, and that's kind of anywhere. What do you see? Yeah.
It seems like the people don't look too happy.
Okay, the people don't look happy. Okay, good. But not happy, and we might kind of dig down into that and try to figure out why and what that means. But what else? What other observations do you see?
There appears to be a pretty big class divide between the two different groups of people. There's the workers and some sort of like businessman or overseer or something like that, right?
Good. So there's definitely a boss of some sort standing right at the front of the picture, by the way, not inconspicuous at the back, but a picture is framed by something, possibly by the photographer, possibly by the manager of the space, but somehow the man in the, do you call that a bowler hat? A 19th century kind of gentleman's hat. So he's right at the front. And then the other people are dressed differently. How are they dressed, by the way? What do you see there? Aprons, the one thing. So they're exposed to some kind of dirty process, presumably.
It's more
Say it again.
this utilitarian, like we're dressed for work, as opposed to him who's dressed fancy. He doesn't.
Yeah.
They're wearing clothes they're willing to have get damaged or get dirty, but he's wearing something nice, which tells you he's probably not working.
Good. So he's not digging down into the other things we see in the scenery here, the oil, the shavings, the dirt that's accumulating. He's there to do what, do you think? Now you have to speculate a little. But why is he there? What's he doing here? Yeah, either manager or the owner, the supervisor. He seems like maybe better dressed than a supervisor, just a supervisor would be. Though probably there would be some kind of dress difference between a supervisor and the line workers. If he's the owner, what do you think his interest is in being in the factory and being in the picture? He's in the picture. Well, he might be proud of his factory, his workers, his output. That's one possibility, that it's about pride. What's another possibility? Any thoughts? I see flickers of hands, but then they seem not to be in the air. So possibly he's worried about wastage, or time wasted, or just wanting to make sure that people are working up to snuff and not wasting materials and not throwing the product on the floor and so forth. That's one possibility. He's wanting to, not to manage exactly, but to supervise, to oversee and make sure that things are going well. Marx makes a funny comment about classical slavery, about why the tools in slave system of production are big and heavy and crude and not very refined. And his idea is, it's not because Roman technology could not be sophisticated. They could only use sledgehammers made out of wood for bopping things. and big axes. It was rather that slaves have no interest in treating their tools well. They have no interest in treating the olive trees well, because they're slaves, they're dominated, they're oppressed. And so they would be very happy to wreck the machine, I'm not talking about machines, I'm talking about tools, but wreck the tools. So you might imagine he's got an interest in making sure that, things are being treated properly and efficiently and with care. That's a possibility. If he were a supervisor, what would be his, let's say a manager, upper management, he's a vice president for production. What would be his job? With respect to that person, do you think that's a man or a woman? I can't actually. Rahab in here. Okay. Let me. What Mike is right now? He's just looking at the camera. But if he were a manager of this, anybody want to estimate how many workers might be in this space? Just not a rule of thumb, a calculation on the back of an envelope. It goes back quite a ways. So you say maybe 20 machines, and maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 rows of workers. So maybe 80 workers in this room, do you think? So what would a manager be doing? A supervisor. Okay, the people who are working hard and efficiently, and the machines are not breaking down. Okay, good, Sam.
I was gonna say along the same lines of like observing, but he could also be like working himself too, because it's not that like his job is just to stand there and watch other people work. Like he could, like if it was really needed, he could contribute to the work as well.
Okay, he could, yeah, that's true. He doesn't seem like he's dressed for that role, but you're right, he could. One thing I read years and years ago was about the rules in Victorian factories. And one rule was no idle chit chat. I say it in a mean way. No talking to the person at the next machine. I say that also in a kind of mean way. Why would that be? What's the purpose of a rule that says you can't talk to a fellow worker?
Start talking about, chances are it'll take away your attention from working, because your attention's not fully on working, you're not getting
Good.
all the work done.
So you're not being efficient if you're chit chatting. You might think that. We can have a little discussion about whether that's true or not. Yeah, good.
So from my personal experience, I'm a manager at a liquor store. And if they're talking so much and I'm trying to tell them something like important information, they want to like ignore it because they're in their own like discussion. So like he might be like saying something important to them, rather than like talking, he can't really do it.
Okay. So he might be wanting to avoid inefficiency. He might be wanting to maintain discipline. This is an orderly factory, and we need to obey the rules. And it was common that if the rules are violated, then it's a penny farthing penalty. So you have to pay. Well, do you pay or do you get docked? You get docked for the penalties that you have for breaking the rules. So he may be assessing the rules. There's one other reason. Gosh, what an important insight this might be. What else happens when people? Yeah, go ahead.
When you can talk to other people, then you can organize, and if you can organize in a place where you're guaranteed to have every person affected by the problem, then your word kind of spreads like wildfire.
Yeah. So there may be chit chat. It's not just idle, but it's also potentially subversive. That what kind of store did you say you worked in?
Oh, it's a composite. It's like a bubble shop.
A bowling shop.
It's like a drink place.
Grapes.
Like drinks.
Grapes. Okay, grapes. Okay, good. I heard bowler. I was thinking bowler hats.
It's like called boba.
Bowler.
It's like a
Oh, cool.
It's like a milk tea.
Oh, wait, it's not like Thai. That's sweet.
Yeah, we have Thai tea.
Wow. Oh, cool. I had Thai. That's sweet in Bangkok.
Oh yeah, it's like that.
Yeah, cool. I also had mango and sticky rice.
That's good.
Very good. So maybe there's a social reason, not just efficiency, it's not just these people are not very hard workers and I need to keep them disciplined. But I'm a little concerned, Mr. Bowler hat, I'm a little concerned that they will begin, I don't know, being a little bit resistant or a little bit insurgent or a little bit, they will be chartists. Are they likely to be chartists? Yeah, kind of. There were millions of chartists. And chartists had we know this, we talked about chartists, they had very modest demands. So there are a lot of different possibilities. Good.
One thing I noticed from the picture is how like none of them are looking at him, the
Mhm.
person. I
Yeah.
think, and
Very
you can notice how the one person's like side-eye kind of to the left. So I think this is like highlighted because I guess it shows like the relationship between the two.
Mhm.
So there's just a level of some trying to like stay out of his way and some like despise him. So I think that highlights that relationship.
Yeah, they don't seem to be pals. They don't seem to have quiet affection for each other. He's kind of glowering at him, but the rest of them are. This man over here is looking down. This one is, you said side-eyeing, the side. Did you say side-eye?
Like side eye.
Yeah.
It's just like expression where like, it's basically like leering or
Yeah.
like looking at someone and.
Yeah, and almost none of them are paying any attention to the photographer. The only one paying attention to the photographer is the boss, which kind of makes me then, or at least speculate. What a crap might be his idea. He thinks this is good. Okay, so that's all kind of cool, and we came up with several important ideas there. So, would you mind flipping the light back on? I think we're ready. Actually, hang on just one second. I'll show you the rest of the photographs that I assembled since they're provided on the. I put them down as a resource after I gathered them. But factory in the distance, bunch of smoke. This is an early. This is probably 1820s factory. What's noticeable here? Just a quick reaction. Girl, young, child labor. This photograph also, it's not a photograph, it's an etching. But it's got kids doing factory style work. Oh, that's something else we didn't notice about the picture. When we get back to it, I want to draw this to that. Anything to notice, especially here? A lot of women here, actually, women workers in this factory. It seems like kind of heavy machines. This group is entirely women. And I believe they're canning things, canning sardines, if I'm not mistaken. I believe I see a sardine tail there in low resolution. Anybody, this is the part I wanted to mention, is the technology. Nobody is just taking small hand tools in these photographs. Well, actually, a few people are doing simple hand tasks. But the really striking thing about these factory photographs is that they're heavy technology. Anybody know what these belts are for? The things coming down from the ceiling? Any guesses? Who's an industrial engineer in the room? Have we got an industrial engineer in the room? It's like on the plane, is there a doctor on the flight? Really, no guess at all what that might be. I love that. I'm gonna learn something cool today. Yeah, you can see it. They're transmitting motion, power to machines from somewhere else, from a steam engine, which is running a great big wheel and then turning axles at the top of the factory. And then the belts are connected to the individual machines. So the belts are then turning the machines. I think you can see stuff like this at the Henry Ford at the museum. That has an implication, actually. What is the implication if you're, I don't know, can I point out a, yeah, so these, I think this is a woman. she's working at a machine which is powered by this bell. But what is the kind of logistical implication of that fact? Can she take her time, be relaxed? Oh, I made a mistake here. I'll go back and fix it. I'm really feeling a little tired. I'm gonna rest for 5 minutes before. Why not?
She doesn't have control of the
Right.
machine.
She's not controlling the speed of the belt or the speed of the machine, so she needs to keep up. There's a movie, I bet I could find a short clip of this, but I won't look. Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times, and he's working in a factory, but the factory is working faster than he is. And so he winds up being drawn into the gears of the factory. You feel like that could happen here. The worker is being paced by the speed of the belts and the speed of the machine. And it's, while you're there, could you flip the light on, please? Thanks. So it's, what's really interesting about this, this is a flash of insight into industrial revolution. This is not people working at home with a hand-operated spinning wheel. This is a factory, the room that we were just looking at, 80 people with machines which are powered by belts. We don't have a photograph of the steam engine, but the big innovation in the early 19th century was the steam engine, which would then power this system of belts and therefore the system of machines. But it had an implication. Well, it had two implications. It had a wacky, fantastic, amazing, if you were a Martian observing Britain, hey, take a look. They just multiplied their output by 80 times over the past 30 years. Whereas they made one woven sweater per 10 minutes 30 years ago, they've now got 80 sweaters coming out of these things they call factories. So a technological innovation or set of technological innovations, which led to dramatic increase in output, dramatic increase in the creation of wealth. Instead of a stable economy producing 10,000 sweaters a year, it's gone from 4,000 sweaters to 400,000 sweaters in a period of 30 or 40 years, with all kinds of implications inside the place of work, implications for workers, but also implications for the Navy. Why do you need a Navy if you are Britain and you're producing sweaters in big factories? Well, you need secure water transport to markets. You need to sell a lot of sweaters in other countries, and also to supply, sources of supply. You need to be able to bring cotton from the Americas, from the United States, cotton produced by slave plantations. Bring cotton to Britain. You probably know that Britain, at least sort of, supported the Confederacy during the Civil War. Do you know that? And why was that? The Confederacy controlled the cotton economy. So there was a material interest in having good relations with the government, which controlled the source of supply for the cotton economy. But the implication then is trade was hugely important to bring raw materials into Britain and then to export goods to other countries. And if there's a slump in the Belgian demand for woven English sweaters, what does that imply? If Belgium was an important export destination and it went from purchasing 100,000 sweaters per year, who cares about sweaters? Let's call it shirts. Everybody needs a shirt. So 100,000 shirts going to Belgium, big recession in Belgium, and it's down to 40,000. And there are several other markets that are happening as well. Implication for the factory? What is the implication? Demand has fallen off by 60%. Yeah, the factory can no longer sell, or the owner, that guy in the bowler hat, can no longer sell the materials as expected. Therefore, he has to reduce production. And reducing production doesn't mean selling off the factory, but it means mothballing part of the factory, only using part of the productive capacity of the factory, And who has to go? Well, all those people, not all of them, but you might say 60 or 70, did I say 60% or 40% reduction? Anyway, big, what did I say? 60, a 60% reduction in output, therefore 60% or maybe 65%, even overshoot a little bit, of those workers need to be put out. They need to be disemployed, they need to be, what's the euphemism we now use if you're being laid off? Let go, yeah, they need to be let go. They are economically superfluous, but we'll welcome you back when times improve, but in the meantime, good luck. So cycles of economic boom and bust are suddenly very, very important to lots and lots of people. Okay, so we got sort of a lot of stuff out of this set of photographs. This is the one we started with. This one I found interesting. It's just kind of striking to me. I think there's only one human being in this photograph, isn't it? It's only this woman in the front. And she's got something like a spinning wheel, which is not powered by a belt. I'm not quite sure. Oh, yeah, you can see the spinning here, right? You can see the thread that's somehow being processed. But these other machines are belt driven and they are silenced. Kind of seems, well, I can tell my little story, but I'm not positive that it's accurate for this photograph, but it kind of looks like a factory that's been taken offline. Presumably because there's some kind of market problem. Okay, pretty grim. Pretty grim. Is that critique? Is that analysis? Is that what we need in order to diagnose what's going on in the British economy? No, not at all. And so that's where we get to what Marx is trying to do. What did I? Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. I realized after making the assignment for today that there's a blog post. I put the blog post up. You can read it if you want. But I kind of tried to summarize in 1,500 words what the basis of Marx's critique of the capitalist economy, the capitalist world, the bourgeois economy, in one blog post, in one diagram, really. I think this illustrates what I'm often saying. I wish we could do this on the board, just have a big diagram. But what I suggest here is that there are three major parts of Marx's critique of the capitalist economy, the British capitalist economy. Parenthetically, the revolutions of 1848. Remember, we kind of learned that one reason why workers of Paris were ready to rise up in barricades in 1848 is that there had been a recession in trade, a contraction of demand, and thousands and thousands of workers had been let go. So unemployment, poor standard of living, people suffering. That was in 1847, an important part of the source of discontent, which led to the revolution of 1848. Is this legible to you? Can you read this? So what it says, if you get right up close and you squint, you can see that Marx's critique of capitalism is that it consists of social relations that have three characteristics, three words, which then unfold into theories. So over here, the word is exploitation. So his critique is that capitalism, whatever else it is a system of exploitation. What is exploitation? Well, a short definition is that it is an involuntary transfer of wealth from one group of people to another group of people. So exploitation is the involuntary transfer of wealth from one group of people to another group. So exploitation part, and it's all that we've talked about so far. On Tuesday, we talked about the text that you read in terms of those dramatic sentences about workers creating more and more wealth, and yet they're separated from the wealth. They create great wealth for Britain, but they don't get to enjoy that wealth because they are separated from it. That is exploitation. They create a lot of value, but they only get a small piece of value which they can then convert into good diet, decent housing, healthcare. Anybody want to have 19th century Victorian healthcare? I'm not interested. Couldn't die of consumption, tuberculosis, if you're not careful, bad disease. Okay, exploitation. But in a way, that's only the tip of the iceberg of Marx's critique. The second is the idea of domination. And we kind of saw that in that photograph. The reason why I wanted to start with that photograph today is the photograph actually captures each element here of exploitation, domination. So what is domination? Well, it's a set of power relations. Yes, I can almost think out power relations which allow one group to compel and subjugate and to subordinate members of another group. So domination is a set of power relations which allow one group to dominate and subordinate another group. And Marx's burning criticism of capitalism is that it creates a system of domination, both domination by the state and domination by economic power. Domination is different from exploitation, but it is a central part of Marx's critique. And then alienation, which is the central word that Marx uses in the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts. And it's what we're really trying to understand here. But what is alienation? Well, it's several different things, but the little thumbnail that I offer here is that it is, I am alienated if I am separated from my human nature, from the things which make me fully human. That's Marx's most fundamental critique in the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts. It's what he refers to as separation from one's species being, one's nature as a human being. This is the most philosophical of Marx's criticisms, and yet it has the ring of truth to it. What gives you satisfaction? Well, being a free human being, forming good and satisfying relationships with other free and equal human beings, being expressive of creative energy and an ability to change the environment around you, to do meaningful work. I think you talked about the meaningful work part a little bit on Tuesday. Marx basically offers, in spite of the fact that he says philosophers, a bunch of hooey, he says negative things about philosophy and the idealizing which happens in philosophy, but he himself has a very definite theory of what it is to be a full human being. It is to be free, it is to be a creator, and it is to be social. Social. Unlike Spencer, Spencer, when we read Spencer, there wasn't a single sentence that said it's a valuable thing to be a human being and to have a friendship, to have a community that you care about, to have a group of people that you care about. Spencer doesn't even imagine that that is an important part of human life. Marx takes it as being fundamental to human life. We have an opportunity for positive social relations. So to be alienated from one's species being is to be separated from one's freedom, from one's creative capacities, and from one's ability to form positive social relationships with other people. Now think back to the photograph. How do those three elements of alienation, how are they kind of illustrated in the photograph? Yeah, here we go. Oh, cool. Let's do a little bit more. Separation from freedom. How is separation from freedom expressed in the factory? Ooh, that's an easy one. Are you free in the 14 hours a day that belongs to Mr. Bowler Hat there? No, you are bonded to your machine. You have specific things to do. And your things to do are mechanical, routine, and repetitive. And what's to say you can't fool around and make jokes and be ironic and sarcastic, etc. Be a little creative and expressive of your own personality. What prevents you from doing that? It's not the machine that prevents it. But there's another element of this photograph which maybe suggests what prevents it. What is it? Well, it's the guy in the bowler hat. He is the voice of discipline. He is the voice of no joking, no laughing, no deviating from the script, no, just focus on your work. We've hired you to work hard and intensely and silently, i.e. to be the cog in the machine, and your free expression of your humanity. Well, that's for the pub. You can go to the pub when you're done, if, by the way, you have any energy left after a 12-hour day, or even a 10-hour day. You can go to the pub. What happens in the pub, by the way? Imagine a kind of a stereotypical English pub. After the workers are released from the factory, the steam whistle, the bell is rung. It's 8 p.m. They have to be back in the factory at 6 a.m. But in the meantime, they're free. They're free. This is their freedom. And they wander over to the pub. What happens in the pub? Do we get free expression of humanity in the pub, do you think? Really? What does happen in a pub? You work in a pub, I think. No, it's not a pub, actually. There's no alcohol served in your Thai iced tea shop. But yeah,
Nice to be with you, like, you get drunk and you say something crazy, maybe your coworker reports you, or you get to a fight with somebody that's really angry, so.
yeah, or you get kind of stupid stuff. You balance spoons on your nose. Is that sounds? I don't know what people do for fun in the pub, but it's not exactly composing poetry, completing your biography of Aristotle. It's not creative stuff. It's just entertainment. It's just fooling around. It's just getting slightly buzzed. It's release from the tension of the day. But is that all there is to a free and equal human life? Marx says to us. Well, it's a pretty limited conception of free and equal human life. What he wants to imagine is a life where your whole life can be creative, it can be an expression of your capacity as a free human being. It is a formation of relationships that go beyond the kind of making jokes with your buddies at the pub, and that's it. That's your social life. He's imagining something deeper than that: friendship, association, maybe a common cause. Maybe it's getting together to raise money for refugees in Ukraine, or displaced people from Russian bombing in Ukraine, or what was the equivalent? I don't know, in 1840, what the equivalent might be. It might be, but it might be, it's whatever you choose. It's doing stuff because you believe in it. Are any of these people doing stuff because they believe in it? No, they're a cog in the machine. So those three elements: explication, we can't really read explication off this, but we can. There was a 12-hour working day, which was in place, 12, even 14 hours before the 10 hours bill. We talked a little bit about the 10 hours bill when we talked about Chartist and the Factory Acts and the reforms of industry, which happened in the middle of the 19th century. But I don't know exactly what year this photograph was taken, but the product which is coming out of this factory is making a profit. The profit is going, if he's not the owner, then he represents the owners. It's going to the owners of property. And the wage is set at, well, at what? At a generous and humane level to allow the worker and his family to enjoy a decent human life No, that's not the goal. That's not the goal of Mr. Bowler here. His goal is, yeah, I mean, no, his goal. His goal, what is his goal? I don't know what I was thinking of. His goal is to employ workers at the lowest wage that people will accept and will accept his direction. He can't force them to stay in the factory. So he's not a slave holder. He can't beat them up if they quit. So the wage needs to be enough to keep them coming back to work. What do you, how do you think the morale, the efficiency of a person who's in the lowest possible wage job in rather lousy working conditions? Efficiency, what do you think? Yeah. Up down. Low, yeah, you would kind of think it's low. I think I told you I kind of stupid experience in a factory not quite as big as this one in Manchester. And the little cannon, I think I told you about the little cannon. But I asked the guy, what's the cannon for? Is that to announce the end of the working day? And he said, no. These workers sometimes would get involved with the, what would they call the machine breakers. There was a term for this movement. I'm blocking on the name for it. But it's people who thought the cause, they were a little less deep than Marx. They didn't have a philosophical cause. They thought the machines were the cause of their exploitation, their miserable lives. And so they would attack the factory and smash the machines. And according to the guy at the factory, he said, and this little cannon came in very useful. They would be walking down the road and the owners would shoot the cannon and scare them off. So it was a part of class struggle. It was a part of the contention of power between the owners of property and the owners of their labor power, who were trying to resist. But they were trying to resist not by challenging the owner himself, but by challenging his factory, by challenging the tools, the technology. You know the word, and I know the word. But it'll come back. So what we've kind of got here then is something really quite remarkable. The remarkable thing is you read about 12 pages or 14 pages of unpublished manuscripts of a 26-year-old unemployed PhD in philosophy. Do you find it striking that the diagnosis of the modern world is as rich and detailed and incisive as it is? To me, it's kind of an amazing thing. This is a very young man who's read a lot of philosophy and now has read a lot of political economy and has come to a diagnosis. What is wrong? You have Herzen asking the same question. You have Carlyle asking the same question. What is wrong with contemporary society? There's something deeply wrong. Marx, at the age 26 in 1844, wrote these manuscripts and tried to bring together his understanding of how property worked, how political economy worked, what it is to be a full human being. And he encapsulated it in these ideas of alienation and freedom and species being. And here's something also really striking. The rest of his career was spent in developing his own economic thinking, which resulted, as I mentioned last time, in the book Das Kapital. Das Kapital, Capital. One volume was published in, I think, 1867. So 23 years after these youthful manuscripts, he published Capital. And then Engels edited a bunch of manuscripts at volume 2 and volume 3, and then kind of additional volumes called Theories of Surplus Value, his economic notes, basically. He spent his career developing his economic ideas. But what is really striking to me is that these unpublished manuscripts actually encapsulate just about everything that became Marx's critique of modern economic and social life. It doesn't make it, you know, the what would you call it? The true description of 19th century social life. But what is striking to me is how penetrating Marx's vision was. It doesn't, I don't mean it's an objective vision. Carlyle's vision was quite different. Herzen's vision was quite different. There's a lot of emphasis on human freedom here and what it is to be a positive, free human being. But in fact, there are other views of human freedom which compete with that view. So in other words, it's not that this is the one analysis that really makes sense of the 19th century. What is striking to me is that for such a youthful person, he got so much into this handful of pages, this dozen pages or so. You haven't read the whole of the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts, but you've read, I think, the most important parts of it. This is Marx calling. So how do we tell it, I don't want the phone call? I guess I figured it out. Now I'm tempted. Did anyone write a card on the mysterious stuff about species being? Okay, you want to pick your card up or you want to just talk? Okay, yeah, good. Help yourself. Don't stand on ceremony. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get to it.
This highlighted, it was number 3.
Okay.
So I put the part where it says it estranges from man's own body as well as external nature and spiritual aspect. And so I talked about his idea of like the worker in the street like human identity. Because for like most people, like work should not like a life purpose, but for them it's just like a need of survival, and they don't have anything to show for their work really, because the objects of their production, those are like the wealthy capitalists, and they're the ones that benefit from it. So for the worker, it's just like they're just working to survive, so they don't really have that like identity that they get from their work that most people do.
Okay.
And yeah, it's
So what would be satisfying work? Let's turn it around a little bit.
well, I guess, I mean, just doing something that you enjoy, and also that I'm just benefiting from your work in a way.
Well, benefiting is that's kind of the material part. Do I get a decent wage for my work?
You can also benefit, like, get like happiness.
Okay, good. Happiness is one possibility, that you take some pleasure, some satisfaction. Okay, so that's one part of what maybe good work might be. Are there other parts?
I guess.
How about work as a shipbuilder's apprentice and then journeyman? So you're a 14-year-old guy, or I don't know if young women became apprentices in the shipbuilding craft, but you started out sweeping the floors, but then you've learned a bunch of tools and you've learned something about what makes a ship seaworthy. In other words, in your 10 years in the shipbuilding, it's not a factory exactly, but it's a yard, you've learned new skills and you've learned more about the world. You've learned if you build your ship too tall, it'll just tip over. So even though it may be to a stupid person, it makes sense to build a ship that's 10 stories high because it's got a lot of carrying capacity. Once you've been a shipbuilder's apprentice, you've come to learn the center of gravity can't be too high above the water or the ship will capsize. You've learned stuff, that's what I'm kind of getting at. So developing your knowledge and your skills, maybe that's another part of the satisfaction. Maybe being a really skillful user of. I met a workman. I think I've told you the story before, but it's worth repeating it. So this was a guy with a 100-pound duffel bag leaving the airport in Beijing. And we were both heading for the airport bus. So he threw his 100-pound duffel. He's an American. And I asked him where he was going. He said, well, I work for a mining machinery company in Milwaukee. And I'm on my way to 12 months of projects in the north of China, and I'll be traveling to India. And all I do is I go to these mines and I examine our equipment and I adjust it so it works correctly. So it's been shipped from Milwaukee to Mongolia, and I go to the Mongolian gold mine and I have to figure out why it's not working right. Why is it vibrating so bad? A mining machine shouldn't vibrate. So I figured it out and I fixed it. This man clearly had a huge amount of pride in his work and took satisfaction. He was, and it's not just that it was kind of pleasurable work, but it was also, it was work that he could take pride in because it was his knowledge and his understanding of the way the tools worked, machine worked, and how he could make adjustments on the ground that led to, you know, a better outcome. I asked him about the engineers back in Milwaukee, and I hate to tell anyone who is an engineer in the making, but he was a craftsman. He said, you know, the engineers never come out in the field, so they don't understand that moving the center of gravity of this machine makes a big difference in vibration. If they only came to Mongolia with me once, they wouldn't change the center of gravity so quickly, so readily, because they would understand better how these things work on the ground. That was kind of his view. It's kind of a view of the specialized scientific designer of a machine versus the skilled craftsman who implements the machine. That person took, like I say, a lot of pride in his work and had knowledge that the engineers back in Milwaukee actually didn't have, but also men and women who were hired in Mongolia. Can't you do something about this machine? It's vibrating so much. They wouldn't know how to do that either. So I would put that to you that it's an example of high reward work. It's work which is not alienating. Yes or no? Is it not alienating in the sense that Marx was referring to? What do you think? Is he alienated from his species being by the work that he does going to Mongolia in the gold mine? I'm kind of suggesting not, because it's using his creative talents, his intelligent talents, his body and mind abilities to solve problems. It allows him to take a lot of pride in what he's able to do in the world. Quite different from, I'm pointing where the picture used to be, from the workers that we see in that factory who have only one thing to do. Every time a bolt drops down, put it in here, bolt, attach it, bolt, attach it. They can't take any pride in their work. It takes no skill, really, aside from the skill that a squirrel has in moving nuts from one bowl to another. There are bowls again. So satisfying work engages somehow the creative, intelligent capacities of the human being. Most industrial jobs lack that. True or not? Do you think that's true or not? People working in the Rouge plant, pointing down the Rouge River, who historically have workers in the Rouge plant. I could be mistaken about this. It may be that work in the Rouge plant now, or for the past 20 years, has been more satisfying work than it was under the time of the 1930s and 40s, possibly. Possibly, I don't know. Anyway, nice. It's a good start. Anything else you wanted to say about species being? Isa, is this relevant, do you think, for right now, or do you want to do it in a minute or two? Okay. Anybody else who did anything about the loss of the alienation of a person's species being? Yeah.
So basically, like what I said was that on like page 6, roughly, like there wasn't a page number, so I just went off of like what I said in the PDF.
Yeah.
It says, in estranging from man, nature, and himself, his own active functions, his life activity, estranged labor, estranges the species from man. Like that really stood out to me. That was like one of like the main points that really just like popped into my head. And after like I read it, I went back and I just reread like that whole page again. And that paragraph just really like stood out to me specifically.
And what do you think it means?
I think it means that everything's like in a way, like everything starts with a man, like getting back to like what we were talking about.
The individual human being?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like you keep saying like man, 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 and it's like the women didn't necessarily like play a role in this, so it gave me like a different perspective because like from like a woman's perspective, like we're put down for a lot of things, or we were put down for a lot of things, and it was just guaranteed for men. And so it just seems like it just shows the growth from then versus today.
Which kind of, does anybody have any reading knowledge of German? What is kind of interesting is that gendered words in German are a little bit different from gendered words in English. Man is very definitely male. Whereas Mann, I think, is understood by German speakers as being humanity or the people, rather than, I'm not sure how gendered it is in German. It's just an interesting thing. Marx was clearly very, very sexist in his thinking and in his personal life. So your point, Sam, is entirely valid about the way that he, for example, he never talks about, or I can't think of context where he talks about the conditions of female workers, whereas Engels does talk about female workers in the material you read about women workers and what the implications are of working 10 or 12 hours for their the rest of their lives. And therefore it's kind of a side issue I'm raising here that we're reading a book in translation, and is it as gendered in German? I'm not completely certain it is. What I'm trying to, this paragraph doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't really know exactly how to interpret it. Because what I understand by species being is kind of human nature. What is it that is most fulfilling to us as human beings? What do we need as human beings? What is our species need as opposed to a donkey's species need? What does a donkey need? Well, a donkey lives to pull things. I don't know, is that true? Maybe a donkey wishes to avoid pulling things like carts. A donkey doesn't have higher consciousness. I was accused of being buggist by my 9-year-old grandson when I said mosquitoes are good for slapping. I said, Grandpa, that's a very buggist thing to say, by which he meant analogous to sexist or racist. And maybe I'm being speciesist in thinking donkeys don't have higher species nature also. But I think it's clear that he thinks that human beings do have higher species nature, which is something about their consciousness, their ability to think reflectively about what they want and need out of their lives. And that's what is destroyed by the capitalist industrial workplace, the factory. But what exactly is it? And it's not clear in this paragraph what it is that he's talking about. in estranging man, nature. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a word. In estranging from man, nature, and himself. To be estranged from nature, I think he's just explained what he means by that. But continuing the sentence, his own active functions, his life activity, what he does as laborer. Estranged labor estranges the species from man. It changes for him the life of the species into a means of individual life. So what is the life of the species? The gloss I would give, but Sam, actually, you raised what do you think he means by that? The life of the species.
Just the way that like things have developed over time. Like, I don't necessarily know what he means by that, like little individual part, but like from like the context given, it just seems like they were viewed as like just they were just used for their ability, and they weren't necessarily like, okay, we could say like people have multiple purposes and they were only serving one purpose for that specific
Yeah.
thing.
Okay, so that's
the
good.
only thing I can think of.
So they have other capacities, other function isn't, I think, the correct word, but other ways of acting, using their bodies, using their skills to do things. But what the factory labor environment allows them to do is just one thing. So they can't kind of develop and apply their many human capacities, which they have as members of the species. So if we follow that line of thought, it's kind of like the species inherently is fairly open-ended in what it needs. But the capitalist factory narrows it down to one thing. It is a need to comply with the work rules of the factory in order to get the wage. And the wage is necessary because it's a natural thing. Now, maybe this is also part of it. Why do we need to work at all? If we were sunflowers, we wouldn't work. We would just spread our little blades of sunflower green stuff and gather sunlight. The nature of a sunflower is that it doesn't need to work. It just satisfies its natural needs through living in a field. Are you with me so far? We human beings don't engage in photosynthesis. So we have to somehow transform nature to satisfy our needs, correct or not? What do you understand me to say when I say that? We human beings as a species need to transform nature in order to satisfy our needs. What does that mean?
Then sunlight, survive, need food, need purified water. So we need to learn how to navigate nature and sort of learn how to handle and change its form in order to satisfy its needs.
Yeah. So we have to, in a kind of a direct way, we have to engage in agriculture. We have to grow things, or hunting possibly. So hunter-gatherer societies didn't engage in agriculture, but they had to transform nature in another way. They had to travel and hunt down animals and then learn how to prepare them for the fire, etc. So hunting and gathering is itself a form of transforming of nature. But human beings, and again, there is inherently a social aspect of both those activities I just mentioned, farming and hunting. Both of those in Neolithic times required social cooperation. We've got a theorem here. Part of human species being is social cooperation, social arrangements that allow us to do things we can't do individually. There's a photo I used some years ago about Southeast Asian village fishing practices. And the photo is of a boat and then a bunch of people who are coordinating the use of big nets, traditional fishing, but in a way which requires social cooperation. And the idea that's conveyed is that cooperative fishing is more efficient. You get more fish for the village by cooperating than by each person going out and catching the fish and bringing them back. I take this as a kind of a promising line of thinking about what is species being. It's something about using human intelligence to transform nature, but it's also using human sociality, social capacities, and ability to form social relationships and form social cooperation in ways which then permit more extensive transformation of nature. I pulled up another blog post, which I think is kind of relevant. What do you think about these two kinds of labor that are depicted here? What's this first guy doing? He's making a sculpture, and what does that require? Is it 9 to 5 repetitive work? No, it's skill, it's creativity, it's vision. He's not just copying the sculpture, he's got a vision of a sculpture. And it's kind of a model of a certain theory of what labor should be. It should be an ability to combine intellectual cognitive capacities with physical capabilities to transform nature, to create the objects which we want, or that we conceive of, or that we find to be beautiful. Why is he doing this? He may be doing it for two reasons. It may be that he is an inspired artist. And this, is it a germ? Is it what is it that he's making? I can't even tell. Any idea? Is it an angel? Is it an amoeba? I have no idea. But he's doing it. He's using his creative intelligence to transform nature. In this case, nature is a block of granite or a block of marble. And what about these people? Well, I don't think this is one of the photographs I used in the slideshow, but it's very similar. These women are transforming nature also. So what's the difference between the two? He's transforming nature, they're transforming nature. What's the difference? Yeah.
It's true, there's less technical training for what the women are doing. He's in a much more spacious area than I assume his work maybe is more passionate, or at least he needed more artistry skill as opposed to.
With his own like commitments, own vision, something like that. Yeah. He is, you might say, a free worker. He's working according to his own conception of what the object is, his own use of skills. They are dominated workers. They're working pretty much as cogs in a machine. So the product doesn't bear their individual human capacities. It is really a product of the machine, which they are facilitating. Yeah.
It's also what you said, like how the first picture he's creative and all these things. It's everything that we would assume labor we want to do, like a job or labor. Whereas it's like a picture, it's just a one way you have to do whatever you're told. And the first picture is just everything that the second picture.
Yeah. So this person was able to exercise skills and capacities which are both physical and also cognitive. They're conceptual. He has a vision of what he's trying to accomplish, and then he uses his hands to transform nature to bring it about. In this case, how about these women? Are they inherently, as species being, creative, intelligent, problem-solving, collaborative, social human beings? Yes or no? Well, are they, by their nature, those things? Well, we might say yes, of course they are. But they're not given a social role which permits them to express those things. They can't express their own creativity, their own ability to solve problems, to transform the nature which sits in front of them, little valves. I think they're doing spooling or something like that. It looks like it's some kind of textile work. It's not literally true that there's no skill in factory work, is it? You have to learn certain things in order to be dexterous in this way. But what's the trouble with that skill? You've gone to the factory, you've spent 20 hours, 10 hours in training, a couple days in work, and now you've gotten very good at pulling the thread out and retying it and putting it onto the loom, and you can do that. They think, wow, how good she is at doing that work. She's very, very skilled. So what's the drawback? Why wouldn't we say she's a creative, skilled worker? Yeah, go ahead.
It's because to learn that skill, you just have to follow rules, and you're not doing anything faster. You're just following a certain blueprint
Yeah,
someone else made, and you're just copying it over and over, and you don't have your own vision into it.
yeah. So it's not really even your skill. We give you credit for the finger work, but it's otherwise a blueprint. Your exercise that you're executing. It's kind of like, what is it kind of like? It's kind of like a valet in the parking lot. The race car driver drives it. Somebody has a race car jacket on, I think. Yeah, cool. I noticed it when you came in the room. The race car driver has all kinds of skill, but the valet parking guy, he's only got one task: take the car and put it in the parking garage and don't bump anything. So that's very limited skill. The race car driver has a lot of skill, and we can say, okay, yeah, we respect the valet's ability to put the car away, but as a human being, he's capable of much, much more than that. And these women here are capable of much more than that. Marx's critique of alienation is now crystal clear. These women are denied the opportunity to develop and exercise their physical capacities, their imagination capacities, and their ability to conceptualize and then solve a problem. That's A. And then B, they're also denied any kind of control over the product, over what it is that they're producing. This guy could have done a sculpture of I think it's a goldfish standing on its tail. That's what I think that sculpture is. A goldfish with a very big head. He could have done the goldfish. Again, I'm joking. I have no idea what it is. He could have done the goldfish. He could have done an angel. He could have done something he saw under a scanning microscope. His artistic imagination was the limit of his ability to do the sculpture. He could do whatever he wanted. That's freedom. The women in the picture have no freedom. They have no ability to develop their skills, but also they have no freedom about what it is that they're producing. And there, I would say that's a really plain illustration of what Marx means by alienation involving separation from one's species being. By the way I'm wired as a human being, I'm capable of skill, imagination, and free creation. But by my work assignment, I'm denied all of those capabilities. I'm under the dominating rules of the factory, and I do just this one thing. And I'll never be able to use that skill anywhere else, because if I go to the beer canning factory, there's no need for that particular skill. So it's not a general skill. Anybody else have a card that you think is especially relevant to today's discussion? Something that you feel ought to be on the table. Step right up. I think that's a song, actually. Step right up. It comes up on YouTube music sometimes. Okay, well, I'm going to refer you to this Hegel, because I think actually Marx's conception of free human species being, I think it actually comes from Hegel. And let's see if here's a little bit of a summary of Hegel's Yeah, this is a good summary, because I think it captures Marx's conception of free human creation. So this is by a man named Alexander Kojev, who wrote in kind of it's not a textbook, a long essay on Hegel's work. The product of work is the worker's production. It is the realization of his project, of his idea. Hence, it is he or she that is realized in and by this product. And consequently, he contemplates himself when he contemplates it. Therefore, it is by work and only by work that man, woman realizes himself objectively as a person. Sam, your point here is would be a very similar point. And in French, I think it is very generalized. Kojev, I think, wrote his book in French. So there's this idea that through work, we realize who we are. What is it to realize? That's kind of an ambiguous word. I realized I forgot my wallet in the car. That's not what realized means here. What does realize mean?
Discovery that you're capable of more than what you do.
Well, that is a possibility. If I were to take these cards and I suddenly have a vision of the Eiffel Tower, and I think if I ripped up the cards and I used a little bit of chewing gum, I could make a tower. And I could have a model of the Eiffel Tower. And so I set about it, I do the ripping up, I chew the gum, I stick this stuff together, and in the end, I've realized, that is, I've made real my vision. It's a work of art. It's the Eiffel Tower is manifested in nature. I've transformed nature, the cards that you gave me, and I've transformed them into something I conceptualized. That's what he means by realizing in this context. This is a really very direct statement of what I think Marx's conception of real free labor should be. It is the realization, when we work, we realize ourselves in the thing which we've done. And that's what this guy is doing. He had the conception of the standing goldfish, and he realized it through his skill and vision. And it's what these women have not been permitted to do. They haven't realized anything about themselves. They have not made real anything about themselves. They have merely exercised the mechanical hand motions to create a profitable. Okay, now there's a bunch of stuff from the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts here. Excuse me, one other passage I'd like to. Yeah, okay, so it's pretty interesting. Could we imagine a modern world in which labor was genuinely free and self-realizing? That's an interesting question. Could you imagine a modern world in which all labor, all work, all pay had to do with work that was, in some practical way, genuinely free and self-realizing? Could you imagine it? You can imagine some kinds of work that are already. Is an architect, is that a free labor or a factory slave architect? Personal judgment, I would say they fall much closer to the free labor side. They're given a lot of professional independence. They conceptualize. They realize. Have you ever seen the architecture? This is Gaudi. The architect designed weird churches. There's one in Barcelona, and they're completely bizarre, but they do stand up. If you had the idea of a church, of a skyscraper that was built like this, it went to a 90-degree angle. It was briefly curved. A new modern statement. As an architect, what do you have to pay attention to? Forces of gravity. How do you keep a structure like that up? Well, maybe it can solve. The architect who solves that problem, he's made a stupid building. Even elevators won't work because they suddenly go the wrong way. But he's solved the problem, holding up the building that's curved under heavy gravity. Free labor. A professor has exactly that kind of job. I get up every morning and come in here reviewing how wonderful I have to use shape. It feels like really good and satisfying work for me. A lot of people don't have good and satisfying work to look forward to. And how and why is that? Marx believes it's systemic. We could have more conversation, but we're going to have to stop because it is now future break. Well, it's not actually going to be classes tomorrow. Our topics with it. I hope you have a good one. And we look forward to seeing you next week or the week after.